Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den Podcast, your home for competitive Digimon TCG discussion and news. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Zenitsu. This week, we will be discussing the newly announced RB01 Rising Wind set. Listen to us on your favorite podcasting networks, link in the description below, or find us at Wolf Den Digimon TCG.
On top of that, this is also live streamed on at twitch.tv/Zenitsu and also uploaded as a YouTube video under the YouTube channel of Zenitsu.
So, this episode kind of didn't fit into our normal schedule, as we felt the need to address the issue topic as it addressed itself, instead of down the line when it may or may not be a problem. So I guess this does come with a disclaimer of we are talking about it now of something that is very far in the future that may not be an issue by the time we get there. But the point is that the current topic of discussion is that it may be an issue as it currently stands.
And this is just our general first reaction and thoughts to it. So if you ever disagree with anything that we say, that's fine. You don't need to get all huffety. Just because we're trying to think about the game itself, what this means, and try to take in the information ourselves. So each person has a different way of coping with this type of news and information, and we're just here to give our general thoughts on it. So sorry if there's any hot takes in the podcast at all. Just wanted to put that up front because there might be.
Yeah. So this is in response to the information we have kind of just gotten indirectly. Of course, information never comes directly from the source we would like it to be from, is which Bandai, but it's the downside of living in the past, or behind Japan at least, because we get things secondhand almost from them, and they just have a history of changing things as they adapt their Japanese product to an American audience in English in the card game, as we saw with the starter deck 11, I believe it was. The Thai starter deck was supposed to be a reprint starter deck meant to ease the uh, power and budget of a lot of the harder to get starter deck cards that we're still seeing play and still very much needed to play in those spaces. And then what did, English Digimon do? They broke that up and made them box toppers and made it almost irrelevant and barely affected the prices of those cards.
Which was really unfortunate, but not necessarily the most surprising thing, considering just the sheer fact that they changed box ratios between English and Japan. We got Special Booster 1.0 and 1.5 to try to play this catch up, not catch up game. So we've always had some slight differences. Even just promo distribution has been different. So them changing a product for us is not out of the blue. It's not something unprecedented. It's just the manner in which they're doing it is what people are taking alarm of.
Yeah. And with that, we have this reprint set that was announced for Japan. And, you know, I've given my opinions on the idea. Other people have given their thoughts on, do we need a reprint set? What should go in a reprint set? What should a reprint set accomplish? All of that. And regardless of our opinions on it, Bandai answered the question by just making the product that they made. And they're basically saying these are the cards that they thought needed to be reprinted. These are the cards that they thought still had reason to see play, and therefore they want people to have access to those cards. Kind of the greatest hits of the first couple sets of all the cards that are still seeing play, cards that are still relevant in certain decks. And then we get the announcement, we being the English North American audience, as the just distribution level announcement of the cards, as we get a release date trickled down through distribution channels. And with that, we got a text box that I know Zenitsu can read for us here, that is just the GTS distribution selling this product to card stores to make orders because it doesn't come out until August.
Yep. So RB1 Rising Wind comes out as of right now. The tentative release date is August 18th. Stores have about 21 days as of the recording of this podcast to be able to pre-order it. If you're unfamiliar, like why we get so much information this far out, even though the product is coming out in August, it's because they need time to take those orders and print those orders and be able to meet the demand. So they have to get this out as soon as they possibly could. So that's where and why this information is coming out now. So what is inside of Rising Wind? Well, according to GTS, there is question mark special packs limited to 36 card types. So they're not 100% sure on what this is themselves with the question mark. These packs will feature all new text and a limited number of types for a greater chance to find rare cards. The character lineup is going to be focused on the Ghost Games anime. This set also includes many cards of the Digimon starring in that series. Question mark new pack size for Digimon card game to attract more users. Packaging now includes a special promo card for a set. Sorry, I'm really bad at reading. When placed in stores, the packaging draws in users to make for an easier purchase. Question mark 1 of 7 PR cards included, featuring one rare PR card, and then 1 of 7 exclusive PR cards are included. The PR cards are alt art cards from the main set, so from the 36 cards, and then one of them will have a low pull rate as an alt art Siriusmon, so that's Gamamon's mega level inside of the set if anyone's curious. And then it gets reprint buyers with incredibly rare cards. And then the rarity breakdown is there's going to be 10 commons, 7 uncommons, 12 rares, 6 super rares, 1 secret rare, combining for a total of 36 cards. Also includes alternate cards. And then as far as like how the boxes go, we have 0 information on what the actual size of the boxes are. We just have some generic information where 1 booster pack will contain 12 cards. 1 booster display box will contain 12 boxes. And then 1 case will have 4 display boxes. So just from the language from that bit alone at the end, it's not going to be your normal booster box that we're used to buying. So it's probably going to be something more akin to the premium pack set, where it's probably just maybe, again, hyperbole, using it as a point of comparison, like 4 packs in a little display thing with a promo inside, and that's kind of all it's going to be, of just the new cards from Rising Wind in Japan. I've heard grumblings from Japan, secondhand, not firsthand, via just watching a couple of Japanese box openings and reading some posts online, that apparently the Japanese pull rates for the new cards and even just the old reprint cards is not super great, which isn't uncommon considering if you look at the size of our Special Booster 1.0, that was a fairly large set, and the pull rates for that were absolutely bad. They were really bad compared to what we have right now. So getting rares and getting super rares, the ones that you want, was just super hard, and that was kind of reflected in the Japanese side of things. So maybe this shift was to try to accommodate, just trying to make it easier to get the new cards, cut all of the old cards out, just because, like, they're not supposed to acknowledge a secondary market. They probably don't. But the majority of the cards that were reprinted weren't necessarily super expensive. Only a small handful of cards are actually, like, really valuable, which, again, some of them were in that set. Would have been nice, but we currently just don't have enough information to, like, really say what exactly this product is, just because this is the distributors trying to sell it to the stores. So the stores can try to sell it to us. So there's obviously going to be more information. GTS has usually been people's go tos because they could look this up, but GTS doesn't necessarily have exactly all of the information, and they're going to release more closer to the release date.
Yeah. So that was a pretty good description of the information that we have. Thank you for doing that. I know that was a lot of reading, but one thing I wanted to point out here was that this is a look into. I know a lot of players have expressed concerns in the past with, oh, my LGS only got 5 boxes, and they, all got sold out on the day that the product came out, and they won't be getting any more, and I guess I can't buy, you know, BT7, BT8, 9, what have you, because, or my LGS isn't getting any BT9 or EX2, and this is kind of why, because, one peek behind the curtain that this is the distribution model of the United States, at least. And stores order from distributors who actually get from, I believe, the factory, printing of the cards themselves, packaging, what have you. But this is kind of the bread and butter when it comes to whether your LGS will have the cards or not and have as much as you can buy, like mine has traditionally been in the last couple sets, I guess since BT5, or prior to that, they had issues where they couldn't get product. They couldn't get any more than the 10 or 12 boxes of 1.0 or 1.5 that sold out to pre-orders before I knew the card game existed. And but since then, obviously the Digimon community has grown. There is a consistent, source of revenue in this. They have faith in the product, basically. So my LGS and the LGSs in my area all have an abundant supply of Digimon because they order it. Like, I mean, I know my LGS got burned pretty bad on EX1 because, I mean, maybe they didn't do their due diligence and they didn't read these little descriptions. They didn't communicate with anyone who actually played the card game and knew a little bit more about it, but they the same amount of EX1 as they did BT5. And anyone that's opened EX1 would know that you basically get a full master set of the entire collection in like two and a half boxes, and you don't really need to buy any more than that. And so people buying whole cases of EX1 didn't really happen, and therefore whole cases of EX1 still sit on my shelf at my LGS today.
And that's why if you look at like TCG Player, the booster box is usually like dirt cheap. It's like 35 $40 usually, USD of course. And like Japanese card games generally all kind of do this. It is not a print to demand game. It is print by pre-order. So the more stores pre-order, the more gets printed, so that way the more can go into the player's hands. Usually at the start of the card game, we're seeing this right now with One Piece. They just they have to lowball themselves, and it's going to piss a lot of people off, but they need to know that everything is going to sell out and there is viability in the product and it is a profitable and marketable product, which again both Digimon and One Piece did at their launch. And it sucks, not that I'm saying that I want to play One Piece, but if I did, I can't get cards, and that's where people were kind of like drawing this correlation from with Digimon and how it released, and why they really wanted this like best hits of Block Zero sets 1 through 5 reprint, is because those cards were underprinted compared to a lot of the current sets based on just how Japanese print card games, which is print by pre-order.
I mean, I wouldn't even go as far as to say it's, a Japanese exclusive thing. It's they yeah, they print to demand in but the demand of the stores, not the demand of the consumers. So if the stores don't order it, then it won't get printed. And that has some benefits and some downsides because honestly, I as much as I love card games and I love the fact that my LGS exists, I still don't really imagine how they turn a serious profit, only because the margins are so tight and there are so many failing products as opposed to the few successful products. And for every, like, yeah, for every BT6, I want to say that my LGS sold out completely, and I haven't seen a BT6 box there since the first couple weeks of the expansion. But the actual, like, the reality is that other sets or other card games get bought and they sit on shelves. I remember when Vanguard relaunched or whatever have you in May, and a couple of my friends and I all bought cards for that set, and then maybe two sets in, I had already stopped playing. It wasn't really for me. I just wanted to play with them, and I saw, new set after new set released that had been pre-ordered, what, 6 months prior, 7 months prior, all this hype, all this announcement to basically no player base. And I don't even know if we ever even had a locals Vanguard scene enough to be supported between Magic and Flesh and Blood and Digimon and uh the Dragon Ball card game, Pokemon, I think a little, Yu-Gi-Oh. How else are these other card games going to compete? And this is really what LGSs have to evaluate them on as standalones. Okay, how successful is the Digimon card game going to be, and how successful is this set going to be for that card game 6 months in the future?
Yeah, like they do have to shut the faucet off. It's not like stores can just go back and order Special Booster 1.0. So that's why they usually give the window for stores to pre-order, and then once that's it, that's it. Um, and that's what makes it so like these older sets are harder to get. But at the same time, um, like there's still plenty of stock for a lot of the product available. Like I could go in and still buy not necessarily 1.0 itself to open, but on the secondary market there's still plenty of those cards floating around. Like it's not like there's an actual shortage on those cards. Yes, some of them are creeping up in price just because more people are coming in, buying up that supply, and then now because there's no new supply hitting the secondary market, what's there is creeping up. And that's kind of like what happens to a lot of card games. And usually, again, reprints help cool that. But we're at a point in Digimon where not all of the old cards, even if they are good, are getting used and are played. Like, decks no longer need BT1 tie. Like, we have BT8 Hero, even though, yes, it's doing a different thing, but again, we have comparable replacements, and depending on the deck, it just doesn't even want it entirely. Like, look at Black War Greymon. Black War Greymon X from the new set. I've seen so many Japanese lists and even a lot of like English early playtesting streams. No one's running that card. So I like it's it's still a good card, don't get me wrong. It's just depending on how you want to play, you could wisely position yourself to not need those old cards, and Bandai is doing a better job at not necessarily power creeping them out of existence, but making it so you don't really need those old cards.
Yeah, and I guess good or bad, I've also given my piece on that subject. I mean, you don't need reprints if you just power creep the older cards out of existence, like BT1 tie. And so if, good that you don't need to buy old expensive cards just for the sake of them being old and harder to get, but bad in the form of you have to constantly keep improving the cards or you end up with that anyway, and then everyone still needs BT1 tie, and the fact that you are making the other cards stronger just kind of breaks the game for no reason. But um, so they came out with this reprint set, and as Anitsu pointed out here, I'm kind of glossing over here that so the English announcement of the reprint set, and its mixed release, or I guess mixed reception in Japan, is that uh, we aren't getting any of the actual reprints by the GTS distribution wording. we are only getting the new cards. The cards that will actually be printed are BO1 because as the game has 100 Agumons in it, you have to refer to a card ultimately by its printing, not by its name, because saying I play Agumon means nothing if you can't say I play DT5072 Agumon, and that's what you put on your card list for an official event that would have a printed deck list like some of the larger local events I've gone to, or something like Nats will have. But we're missing those reprints. We're not getting, by this description, those reprints. We're just getting a smaller alt set that is very, yeah, the premium booster esque that will only contain the small count of new cards, and that the English release will never see a true reprint set.
At least as of right now, because the other rumor has it where it's just like, okay, maybe they just split the product. Where it's just like, okay, we're still getting the reprints. It's just gonna be in a more dedicated reprint set. And I don't necessarily hate that idea and hate that sentiment, just because again, the larger your set, the harder it is to be able to pull exactly what you need. And if the goal in objective is to get cards into players' hands, then just shoving them all off into their own separate little product is probably more beneficial. So that way, if you don't care about any of the Ghost Game cards and you don't care about Gamamon, you don't need to buy into this special product. Where Japan, they were kind of forced to, and they were like, okay, we just want the new cards, or we just want the old cards. So by catering to everybody, they made nobody happy, to an extent. And part of the reason why they even did the reprints to begin with was to try to fix the limitations on Asian territories outside of Japan for some of their special promos, just because they had a distribution problem. So maybe they could use that type of a product to try to fix some of ours as well in the future, if there is any. So it's not necessarily all doom and gloom that it didn't necessarily, according to the description, get a full, like, 100 something set made out of it. We just still don't know the full scope on what Bandai is trying to play with and the cards they're trying to lay out for us.
Yeah, I I think this would be a good time maybe to move out of just description of the events and more so our reactions to them. And because I was actually really disappointed when I heard of the reprint set, because I am someone who have been avidly collecting the game since its beginning and have gone back and collected cards that I wasn't able to get originally, or cards that, oh, I wasn't a blue player, I've never played a blue deck, so I didn't have any of the 1.0, 1.5 like blue staples, and if I wanted to play a blue deck, I needed to pick those up and stuff like that. But I have done that, and so when I saw that the reprint set was going to be more than just reprints, I was a little upset because I don't need reprints. I only need new cards. So this Rising Wind, premium product, whatever, is technically more akin to something I would want. But I know I'm not every Digimon player. I know I'm not even the average Digimon player by, purchasing, or product standards. And therefore, we should have that alternative product for those that do think those cards are too expensive or unobtainable or what have you. Because I mean, this is basically what I would prefer them to do if they were going to rotate the card game and introduce a rotation. This would be core set 2024 or whatever, like Magic does. They always do it in the summer of the year like preceding. So core set 2020 comes out in summer of 2019, and it sets the stage for what is therefore legal moving forward after rotation. And this was the greatest hits of the first couple sets of the card game. And while rotation probably doesn't need to happen, as we've talked about, because of the aforementioned continuous uh, power creep of the card game, there's no reason to like ban Argomon level 6 that wouldn't get reprinted. Darn, Argomon level 6 can't use it anymore because no one's using it anyway. And if you're using stuff from even 2 or 3 sets ago, you're probably wrong. So this was just shoring up the holes of the few cards that do see play.
Yeah, I mean, my first knee jerk reaction was kind of similar to yours. I am in a very interesting position where I have consistently bought a case of every single set of Digimon all the way up until now. Right now, I don't have anything past BT11 pre ordered, just because I stopped pre ordering because that was the worst decision I decided to make. But I needed to do it early in the game's life in order to ensure that I get product. But the reason why I stopped was because I had time delays, because I wasn't necessarily buying it from my LGS because they were having a hard time. So I was going through other avenues, and I would get my product like literally a week to 2 weeks to sometimes even a month late. And I was just super sick and tired of that. So recently I started asking my LGS if they would be able to get a case for me, and they were just like, yeah, now there's no distribution issues, we can get you a case very easily. So yeah, but I've consistently bought a case, so I'm just like, I heard the reprint set and I'm like, cool, I could completely ignore it. I don't need to spend any money at all because I already have all of these cards. That was my very, very, very first reaction. Then they said, oh, by the way, there's new cards in it, and I'm like, ah, crap. Well, I guess I'm going to be going on TCG Player and buying all the singles as a full playset, and like that was just how I felt at that time. I understand that reprints are good for the game, keeps prices down, keeps the game in a more accessible state. Um, I'm all for reprints, and Bandai has done a very good job reprinting quite a lot of cards quite often. I don't know if anyone's bothered to take a look at all of the alternate art special edition cards of just how many times they reprint cards, even some of the dud cards they tend to reprint, but they reprint cards very often. So again, me hearing the reprint set kind of was just like, okay, whatever. So now that I heard that it Rising Wind for English, according to the description, is just going to be a standalone product, I'm like, oh, no reprints? Cool. I actually have a reason to buy it now. And again, I get not everyone is in this position like I am, but like that that's just my raw reaction to it and how I felt. And that's why I kind of hope that for those players, we do get a reprint set. But again, we don't know everything that Bandai has lined up. They probably have everything for the entire year lined up, and they're just waiting on logistics to finalize things and figure things out as they're going along. So who knows? Maybe they're still trying to figure out what this is for us and how it's going to impact us and all of that jazz. So like, I don't know. I've kind of like stooped on it, and I'm just I'm kind of neutral at this point. I'm not angry. I'm not like overjoyed. I'm just neutral.
Yeah. Um, I think that it's fair to address the concerns the community has with this product, especially with the fact that they're not adding the reprints that many people believe needed to be added. And because of that, we end up in a world where what is going to, and I mean, I haven't looked at prices. I guess I should have looked at prices, but I know a lot of those cards that were in the reprint set that are now potentially not seeing a reprint have the freedom to just shoot into the moon because there's no ceiling in sight as far as, this is the amount of product that's available, this is the current going rate, and you either pay it or you don't get the product, and then you can't, play this specific version of this deck or this many copies of that card. And the way Digimon is right now, especially if you're not actively playing almost, the razor's edge of defined lists, you're kind of almost out of the running, at least competitively. That's the only really the method I speak to. But, you know, we sit here and argue about ratios all day about what's better or what's worse, and, depends on the results we see. But the difference between, 2 or 3 Davis is usually a deck choice thing, not so much a a method of do I have 2 or 3 Davis? And if that becomes the issue, you're almost removed from the discussion of, well, I only have two Davis, so I'm running two Davis, and I don't think it's better. It's just what I have. So like the likelihood of you hitting those top tables at these kinds of events is less, just because of everyone else is running three because they think three is the best, not because they only have three.
Yeah. And like market aside, like I remember reading like as the spoilers were coming out, a lot of people actually were very negative on the spoilers on their initial like upcoming. It's just like, "Oh, why are we getting Lucimon reprinted? It's only $10. It's not worth it." Or why is BT5 Omnimon getting reprinted? Or like it there was just a lot of cards that people were just like, "I don't understand why this is getting reprinted." And they kind of just scoffed at it and didn't really want it. And I don't know if Bandai listened to any of that feedback while they already had this planned for Japan, but like that is something the community actually vocalized was they didn't want the majority of the cards that were being reprinted. It's like I remember we were all hyped up and trying to speculate on what exactly was going to be coming out. I realized the pattern really quickly that it was just all cards from sets 1 through 5. And that was kind of like their big cutoff, even the promos. And people were just like, we don't need any of these. Like we just don't. There's again that very small handful of cards, even the ones that were getting reprinted, that are even remotely worth it. And like they do have alternative channels to be able to give us those reprints. Granted, most of the time the incentivization is to play in events to be able to get those cards. Just like how the starter deck Greymon, as an example, literally just got a reprint as a participation promo for pre-releases in BT11. You want to get that card? The easiest way to get that card? Go play in your pre-release. Like, boom, done. They have ways, and they do that constantly to try to incentivize us to participate in their events. And, like, a reprint set, again, is still nice, but we have alternative ways that they have available to be able to give us cards.
I think it's important to note here too that um is it I know it's not one of our podcasts if it doesn't include like the super doomerist take, but um I don't know if there'll be any shortage of older cards if the card game continues in its current trajectory, because there'll be plenty of people quitting and selling their old cards, so that'll be the reprint set when people quit and play One Piece.
Yeah, like anyone who's saying we're not getting reprints, so I'm quitting the game, I think that's a little extreme. Just because like there's still, like I said, plenty of cheap decks to play that are still
It's still
good.
the cheapest card game,
Oh,
right?
by a country
It's
mile.
and I know we did that a little while ago, but those numbers haven't moved too much. It is still by far the cheapest card game to play in the top 5. So if if you want to play a big card game, now yes, I imagine people, if they want to go into the comment section and be like, "Oh, I play the Mighty Number 9, the series card game, and it's cheaper." It's like, yeah, you and the three people that know that card game exists. I don't even know that exists. I just made that up. But you know what I mean. Zenitsu knows plenty of card games that no longer exist that nobody plays that may be cheaper. Or
Oh,
maybe because
100%.
nobody plays, they're more expensive. But the point being is that Digimon has retained, and it was actually one of the takes I thought was the most measured Doomer take, was that Digimon is fun and cheap. If it loses one of those, it ceases to be what it is. So if it stops being fun, it doesn't matter if it's cheap, people will stop playing. But if it stops being cheap, I think it will also stop seeing people play, because if you wanted to play a funner card game, there are bigger, better card games out there that have larger, consistent locals audiences, or have, better, well-structured competitive environments, if that's what you're looking for, in the form of Flesh and Blood, who just announced like their whole new Pro Tour structure and a whole bunch of competitive support. Even Magic backed down, and now they have a Pro Tour again, kind of. And but the point being is, if you wanted to play a competitive card game just to play a competitive card game, you wouldn't play Digimon. You play Digimon to be a competitive card game, that is the cheapest competitive card game.
I mean, just look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are in the hundreds of dollars. And
You play
like
Yu-Gi-Oh competitively because you hate yourself.
I don't wish that upon anyone playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, and I'm sorry for anyone who
It's
does.
the eighth layer of hell.
It really is. I went back for a hot minute and I was like, I do not like anything that I'm seeing here. And yeah. But regardless, like Digimon is still a very, very cheap card game. So what if you can't get your hands on Magna Angemon? Don't play a deck that uses Magna Angemon.
And
Simple.
don't play
Done.
Secon anyway. I've been saying that since the beginning. You shouldn't be playing Secon. Nobody cares about Magdangemon.
And that's like literally the most expensive base SR that we have, mostly because it's just an older card and there hasn't really been a good functional replacement for it. And it has this like niche inside of Mastimon as well. But again, even Mastimon's trying to phase that out because they're giving you more options. They're not necessarily better options all of the time. It's just more options allows you to be able to do more with the card game. So now that in BT11 we're getting a new line of Angelomon and Lady Devimon. Compare that with the Mastimon starter deck one. Compare that with the Maycrack line. Like, there's just other things that we could play that we don't necessarily need to hardlock ourselves into thinking this is a mandatory card. Now, if you're trying to play the most optimal version of the deck, sure, okay, that might be a mandatory thing at the highest competitive level. But if you're just sleeving up a deck, going to locals, and just trying to have fun, you don't need it. Same thing with Death X. It creeped up and now it's creeping down because people realized, oh, we just don't need it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it also speaks to the age of the cards because Death X is already kind of power crept out of existence, right? Like,
I don't think
uh,
he is. It's just the playstyle
hit,
doesn't allow for him to
well,
be good.
the niche that he occupies is also occupied by the best deck in the format in multiple cards that it includes that don't need to be Death X, right? Like
Yeah,
you don't need to you don't need to play a card that's an absolute bomb against a tamer deck when you can just kill all of their tamers and refuse to allow anyone to play tamer based decks.
yeah. But that goes to like what I said before, where it's more of an environmental thing. So like part of the reason why, at least in Japan, blue hybrids kind of like went away is because the environment shifted to where we're just not sitting with Digimon on our field all the time, which we were back in BT7 and even BT8 because of how DNA worked. We needed to have Digimon on our field in order to DNA. So that kind of just led to an environment where blue hybrids just ate those decks alive because they took advantage of how they wanted to play. Now that we're still kind of single stack based and we're not having a whole bunch of Digimon and even a whole bunch of Tamers on the field, thanks to Black War, it's like, okay, what is Death X doing? Nothing. Like, the environment just doesn't allow him to be good. Not saying he's not a bad card, because he's still a very good card. And the second we're back in a go wide format, he's going to be an absolute menace. But we're currently not there, so he's currently not really that needed.
Yeah. Um, we probably should have put this at the beginning. I forgot, and I've had it pulled up this whole time, but we do have a response from Bandai regarding the Rising Wind situation. It's pretty PRE and doesn't really say anything, but I would feel obligated to say at least what they have given in response to the situation, given the controversy that it has started in the last, couple days. So someone emails Bandai, and that's where a lot of we get like official Bandai information. This is a Reddit post of someone's email with Bandai. We appreciate your support for Cardass Club. That's what you have to email. They don't call themselves Bandai; they call themselves Cardass. That's hilarious. We, Bandai, have not yet announced any information concerning RBO1 English version. Please wait for updates on the official website and social media. We will share your comments with the department in charge and use them as a reference in future product development. We work hard to deliver the best for everyone enjoying our English version products. Best regards, Cardass. So that is a pretty generic response, but I feel like it's a very pointed response in the fact that They have not technically announced any information regarding our BO1 in English. The information we have that everyone is freaking out about is GTS's description of the product and nothing more.
Like, we don't
It's
even
technically
know.
secondhand information.
Yeah, and we don't even know stuff like pull rates. Like, oh, how, like, going back to BT11, how is the campaign rares going to affect the booster boxes? Well, they don't have that information on the product description because that they're trying to sell you it. They're saying, "Oh, hey, look, this is something cool that's there." And like, yes, the reprints is a selling point, but again, it's secondhand information. It's not all there. They had even question marks in their own post.
They were
Um,
at the beginning, so it felt like it was like a placeholder, but um the like all the information they have for the most part, besides the words they added of like, ooh, like campaign rare, we'll sell more boxes because of that, like them selling the product to the stores, but I'm pretty sure all the information they have can just be read from the physical product itself. That's about it. Like they were provided, images of the boxes and, you zoom in on the back and you see the number of the cards in the set. You see a small description of the set and that's really all they have. So Bandai, they do English announcements for cards for anyone that lives with their head up their ass for 6 months and just refuses to see any spoilers for Japanese information or cards that are announced. Or so if you're potentially someone who exists in that small hole, then you can find out about the cards for the first time as they're announced in English 7 months after they're competitively legal in Japan.
Yeah. I was just looking at a booster box, and it does have most of that information on there. It
No,
does say
that
like, oh,
yeah, that
there's a
wasn't me
hundred.
guessing. That was me knowing.
Yeah, I wanted to double check. Okay.
No, I'm just like I knew they added other stuff, but for the most part, um, that's all they have. And so we are freaking out about, or I say we, I'm not freaking out. I don't care. Um, People are freaking out about a description of a product that doesn't come out for 6 months and that currently Bandai has released zero promotional media for in any way. You know,
Yeah.
you're freaking out about the movie before we even seen the trailer.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, not saying that none of it is not warranted. But like, this is probably going to be one of the hottest takes that I've had in a while. I do have a lot of hot takes. Don't get me wrong. But I honestly, this is what year 3 of
Mhm.
Digimon. Um, I still kind of think it's too early for reprints. Like, we've already gotten so many reprints just from them doing what they have been doing for the past 2 years. I still am not 100% even sold on the idea of a reprint set. Like, again, there's not that many cards from Block Zero, as I'm labeling it, or Year One, how it sets 1 through 5, that are still meta playable and meta defining. There's a couple, sure, and they have a high price, sure, but again, the way that they've been making the game, they've given us more tools where we don't need them anymore. And if we do need them, they'll find a way to reprint them and give them to us.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Uh, I think I think the bigger issue, as I mentioned earlier, is just that the cards are power crept out of the game. We don't need reprints because 3 sets after a card comes out, it's completely irrelevant. I mean, there are cards that show up in archetypes that are supported in later sets, but they're fewer and far between, especially as we move more into archetype-based design and away from generalities, because the first couple sets were very generic in that they were just supporting color ideologies and less archetypes. So, why do I want BT1 tie when it doesn't say Greymon on it? So it might as well not exist. Or why would I play this random blue tamer, Davis, when there's another blue tamer that says Blue Flare on it, and then I want to play the one that says the deck I'm playing.
I mean, that is part of it. I'm definitely not denying that. Usually archetypical design does want you to play stuff with inside of the archetype, and the more supported an archetype is, usually the more powerful it tends to be. At least that's what we're supposedly going to be seeing with Greymon. Just because Greymon has gotten so much support already and is getting more support and is getting another set of support and another set of support, that like it is kind of a little bit on the overbloated side, but they're still printing like some really interesting generic-esque tools, like Dorbikmon. Like I love how Machine Dramon and Dorbikmon are played because you have a very unconventional wide plethora of cards that you could pull from. You have the color based cards, you have the machine and cyborg based cards, you just have like some generically decent cards that fit inside of the color. You have the ability to splash other colors. Like, not saying that archetypes aren't necessarily the end all be all, but Digimon is kind of, at least the TCG, is finding interesting ways to be able to introduce other ways to be able to build decks. But going back to the core of the conversation, the fact that yes, Yuga, the
Yep.
Black War Greymon tamer,
Hmm.
he's going to be
He
the one
says
that's
Greymon.
yeah, he says Greymon, so obviously a lot of Greymon decks are gonna want to run him
I mean,
instead of Tai. It's not saying that Tai is bad, just like how Mimi is like the only good green tamer.
because there are no good green cards.
There's good green cards, but like they haven't had a good green tamer to really like replace that Mimi, where at least like they're trying to sometimes add these like generic tools to be able to like replace them. Um at least like the good ones, so you have substitutions. Like, I don't know. Um but as we do move towards a more archetypical game while still getting a couple of generic support cards here and there, um these older cards that are just more generic aren't necessarily seeing a lot of play. Like, you could even just look at a lot of Japanese decks, and some of them stop running the the floodgate rookies just because they don't fit inside of the deck's archetype. So
They don't say
why,
Greymon.
yeah, why are they being ran? They're being ran mostly for that hate slot, but if that slot, especially in best of one or best of three, trying to be hyper consistent as you possibly can, like me putting in one Madoki Betamon into whatever blue deck I'm running, like if I see that Madoki Betamon and I need it to be a Gabumon as an example, like, oh, that kind of just feels really bad, and now this card just feels like it just wasted a slot in my deck just because it's not gonna do much. And if it is gonna do much, like it needs to be super hyper impactful. Not saying the Floodgate rookies aren't impactful, because they are, but again, depending on how much space the deck has, some have an easier time fitting those in than others.
Yeah, and I think there's almost room for counter archetypes at this point. Like, I want the anti Greymon deck that just all of their cards just say they beat Greymon. I don't
I
even care if I mean, you don't have to make it Greymon specifically. I'm not calling just because Greymon's the best deck right now. You could make like an anti like Gabumon deck, do the same thing, make an anti Jesmon deck. I just think that it'd be hilarious that you in an event match up against the one guy and he flips his rookie and it's just like the inheritable is like if your opponent has a level 6 Greymon, like trash the top card of their security.
so like what they did with more of a generic tech than anything, Avenge Kidmon, because Avenge Kidmon said,
Yeah,
"Hey, hose on
you gotta
the
make it
other
the whole
Three
deck though.
Musketeers deck." I know.
I want the Tamer that says anti Greymon. I want the level 3 that says anti
It's
Greymon.
it's just funny because
I
that's
want the
like the
4 and the
first.
4X that say anti Greymon.
I get it. Like it's just funny because that's the one example that we have of like an anti-specific archetype card that has a lot of good general usability to it. So they definitely could. It's just I don't know what they would like, what deck that would be. I mean, it could easily be like a villain deck like Gizamon, where it's just like these are just weird parts that don't really fit inside of anything, so they could kind of be their own little sub package, kind of like where Leomon is right now, where it's just like blue green Leomon has this little core, but it doesn't have a level 6 and it doesn't have any level 3s, so it's like, what the heck do you do with this thing? Um, and that's like incomplete packages I find to be the most interesting thing about Digimon is like because when you don't have the full set of cards that are designed to make this cohesive deck, you kind of get creative and that's where the fun happens. And I get that like some people are going to be like, yeah, but without the reprints we can't necessarily have some of that fun because we don't have access to some of the older cards, and I'm just like, Leomon is currently 5 cents. Do you need to reprint this 5 cent card? Oh, he has a $10 alt art. Okay, if you want to spend that $10, sure, go ahead. I'm gonna be happy with my 5 cent card. And Bandai is definitely not afraid to reprint cards in various other ways. We have the Beelzemon starter deck that's coming out, and they literally gave you everything that you need for Beelzemon inside of that starter deck, including the upgrade pack that they have, where it's just like, oh, I need to spend like $50 on the secret rare Beelzemon, or just open up the reprint pack inside of that set, and boom, they gave you one copy of the secret rare with your starter deck. Congratulations! Like Bandai, even in Dragon Ball, is not afraid to reprint cards. Like that's kind of the message that I'm trying to get across is like just because this particular product doesn't necessarily state or say explicitly right now there's going to be reprints doesn't necessarily mean we're not getting reprints and they don't reprint cards. I think like just the idea of having the set is cool, but again, as a business, they need to weigh that on how they want to distribute distribute the reprints, what reprints they're going to distribute. Is this going to be a profitable product? Because who's going to buy it? If everyone doesn't need the cards, then why are they reprinting the cards? Like, obviously, the Masters route is they pick the highest value cards, secretly looking at the secondary market, and then they'll just put in a whole bunch of fluff and filler for the rest of it in hopes that people try to like lottery their way into getting the good cards. But again, is that a meaningful way to be able to get those reprints in people's hands? I don't know. I like their direct approach, but I also wouldn't mind a full set.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something I was gonna say earlier. Um, I'm not opposed to larger sets either. I think people don't like the 1.0 and the 1.5 were hard because it was a brand new card game with so many playable pieces in it, and if you wanted to play a certain deck, you had to really search for like a full play set of these really hard to find rares and uncommons and stuff like that. But Magic has larger sets, right? And they don't have any issues with people having product or being able to play the deck they want based on the cards that they get. And I think we just, cheaper card game, different mentality, but the mindset we have as Digimon players is that, oh, I should get a full play set of every card if I open like 5 boxes, or a playset of every secret rare if I open a case, and that they just play on those safe ratios. But Magic doesn't play that game. Magic plays you get 2 to 3 mythic rares. There are 12 mythic rares. You will not get a playset of any of them. You'll be lucky if you get one of them. And that's part of their philosophy, besides, just their current, direction that they're going in. But, this has been going on for a while where you'd need to trade to buy the cards that you actually want, right? You can't just, oh, I'm going to buy 3 boxes of the new set, open them up, and have a deck ready to go. Because more than likely, you will not get a mythic rare that even fits in the deck that you wanted to play, regardless of, the fact that their colors are more generic and whatever. But, if you want to play a green deck and you get a green-red mythic rare, that doesn't help you because you're not running the red mana. You can't play the red card. I think that's something Digimon could do and not freak out. I mean, I think it's more of a Japanese card game thing to have these smaller sets with very easy to achieve ratios where I mean, like I said, I you get 4 to 5 boxes, you get a playset of every super rare basically. Like in no other card game is that the norm that isn't Japanese.
Yeah, I was reading the interwebs, and some guy was like, "Hey, is it normal to pull like literally at least one of almost every card except for like three or four, um, in one single booster box?" And like yes, for Digimon, yes, that is normal because
Yep.
like if you do the breakdown of like how cards are distributed inside of a booster box, like one booster box, if you get your secret rare, boom. That's already four cards away from having at least one card out of the entire set. And
Hmm.
I kind of like that about Digimon. I like how accessible booster boxes generally are, and they've been that way for quite a while.
I mean, accessible, yes, I enjoy that portion of it. I just don't like how predictable it is, and it really kind of ruins the box opening and the pseudo lottery that every card game player kind of wants to play, even though they say they don't like it. When if I know if I'm gonna open a box, if I'm like, but okay, there's my seventh SR. The rest of these I can throw away. I know there's not going to be an SR there. I know there's not going to be an alt art there. They're sitting in front of me. I can take the next 6 packs and burn them, knowing that I'm not burning anything of value or anything that I don't need or anything that I need because there's no chance in it. And people post their box openings on Reddit or Facebook or whatever, and they're, oh man, look at my pulls. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else. Everybody got those cards. Maybe -1 replacing, you know, uh, one SR for another. That's it. That's all that's different.
I
Like,
mean,
there's no fun in that.
they're just happy that they are getting something, and I get it, and that's why you should never almost buy any like uh individual packs for that specific reason, because some people could just like scalp all of the good cards and then leave literally the rest of the box unopened and just be like, oh look, here's some loose packs, you could still get something, but I already know as the seller, being a scummy seller, which I'm not. I literally open everything, so I don't have any loose packs, outside of the tournament packs that I collect. But yeah, like that's why you shouldn't buy just loose packs, especially on like eBay or TCG Player, even though they're now the same place. But regardless, um, but people are just happy opening stuff, and I do think like if they are gonna do a reprint dedicated booster box, having it be on the larger side probably is for their benefit. Like yes, it does make pull rates harder, but all of the cards are reprints. They all already exist. You're not trying to hunt down the Gamamon that you really want, but it's now being bloated, um, to the point where I can't find it with all of the other cards. Same thing with like the super rares and secrets from the Rising Wind stuff. Like if you're really into that stuff, it's going to be really hard to pull it based on the Japanese stuff. And the Japanese ratios having it all be in one product, which is why I like the idea of having it be separate products. And if Bandai is listening, I know they're not, but I hope they are. Please consider a secondary, like, reprint dedicated product. You could put however much cards you want in it. I don't necessarily mind. Just to try to make people happy and try to get reprints in people's hands. I still think it's a little early considering the majority of the cards aren't really that expensive, but people want what people want, and I'm not going to ruin on their fun.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty succinct point. With that, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. I know this was a little kind of a break from the norm, but we felt as though it needed to get discussed.
Yeah, we're open to doing not necessarily hardcore meta things, but more topical things when they arise. Just because we're still Digimon players at the end of the day too, so it does affect us and it does affect our competitive landscape. So it's kind of like a correlation type of a deal.
Yep. And with that, goodbye.
Later.